Hello, and welcome to another episode of our Continuous X podcast, where we try to solve for X in the SDLC equation. I'm Rick Stewart, Chief Software Technologist at DLT, a tech data company. And I'm joined here today with my co-host, Mike Fitzurka, Senior Engineer here at DLT. Our guest is Ryan O'Daniel, Senior Sales Engineer for Sysdig. Sysdig is a cloud-native intelligence company at the forefront of container and microservices adoption in the enterprise. Sysdig is also a significant component to our secure software factory, as it contributes to making reliable, secure containers a reality for enterprises everywhere, and fosters our continuous security and monitoring. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you guys for having me.
As you know, our format here is to ask you questions. So we'll ask you questions and answer to your best of your ability, but any wrong answers, Ryan, we will pull out a fingernail and it will be excruciating painful for you. So just be careful with your answers. Also have your loved ones in the audience, and they will be going through this horrible thing. Be careful.
So, CrossFit has prepared me well for this. I can't wait.
All right. So question number one, Ryan. Do you think it's vital to the government sector to move their systems to a container-based platform, and why?
I mean, the answer is yes, but so back when I was a contractor to the government, a bunch of years ago, it was cloud, and I would say, use the right tool for the job, and maybe that is cloud. But at the time, it was we're going to lift and shift, and we're going to forklift all of our things that we're running in our data center. We're not going to refactor them, and we're going to put them in the cloud. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, that's very expensive. You're paying as a utility. This is you're going to quickly come back to your data centers. Don't lock the door, turn out the lights, and throw away the key. So I think, is it vital? Yeah, if it makes sense. Use the container-based capabilities for things like public sector that support the entire United States. Thinking maybe IRS or health. Certainly in a time of COVID, we're seeing people, or maybe like benefits for folks that are needing benefits because of those impacted by the pandemic. So yes. And if you do it, be secure, because it's sort of timely that we see the news in over the weekend, and this is early December, where bad things have gotten into the software lifecycle, and that's gonna happen. I'm not going to sit there and beat anybody up for that. And I used to be a security practitioner at a security company, and the first thing that someone's like, well, our capabilities are foolproof. I'm like, no, if I was the customer sitting on the other side of the desk, and you as the security salesperson, I'm going to call you a salesperson. You're not a practitioner. You're a salesperson. If you said my capabilities are foolproof, I'd say get the heck out of my office. So that's a long-winded way of saying, is it vital? Well, yeah, if it's the right tool to help you. If you need uptime that's 100%, if you need to service a ton of people, the ability for cloud-native technologies, containers, to grow and shrink and expand are very, very appropriate for this. And does it take a little bit of effort? Absolutely. And do we have to be worried about the same things that we are for traditional legacy applications? 1,000% you have to do that. So, reasons why they would do that is growth, supporting U.S. public, and then the flexibility, speed. And then if you can secure it correctly, this ability to have insight and apply cloud native controls so you can have visibility where you're not at risk.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that you made, because one, of course, it depends on what your problem is. Don't get a hammer and start making everything a nail. But the other aspect of it, the security breach that you referred to, that's actually referenced it. Our last episode, we talked about that seems to be the new attack vector. Go for the tools that people are using and implant your security flaws there, and then that factors back out. That is insidious.
But that is a bad day, and somebody, you don't ever want to wake up to that. Right. But I sort of joke. I'm like, when I'm talking to my customers, it's like, we can help you so you're not on the front page of CNN.com for the wrong reasons, or whatever website you visit to get your news. Hopefully it's not, social media. But I'll joke and I'll be like, we're absolutely helping you watch for the malicious insider. We're also watching for, maybe you're afraid of insert some country's name boogeyman. And what you can do is we'll get to this, I'm sure, but it's not just, okay, I have to protect the container image. I have to make sure there's no vulnerabilities, because those will change with time. That's dynamic. CVEs will be created or found, and then CVEs will be created. It's how do I have risk observation? How can I make sure this thing doesn't go off the rails? And if it does, how can I react to that quickly? Otherwise, you're not going to win. It's breaches will happen, bad things will happen. That's life. That's not just IT. How do we sit there and how do we help mitigate those and correct them when they do happen?
Yeah, I think containers are extremely useful in their proper capability, provided that you know about them and how they actually run. There's a lot of movement. The pendulum is shifting. Everybody's going to containers. There's still a lot of mundane, blocking and tackling issues about running as root, system administrators, allowing them to run as root. You need checks and balances to ensure, like you said, I love that risk of observability. A lot of people don't know because they don't know the inherent risks that are involved in the layers of security and how they actually, or in the containers and how they actually run. So I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some aspects things get a little bit easier because containers should be, special purpose. They should be immutable. So, like the second that if I've got a MySQL container and it's running off of any port other than 3306, hey, raise the flag on that, Houston. We've got a problem. So you can profile those and you can enact policy on those very easily. And then you get to start talking about, zero trust, which is something that's sort of interesting as well. And I know that the government is sort of going towards that. And my impression is that's something that's sort of been a cloud native way of doing things with security groups and other things like that for a while. So I love that they're getting there for that too. And is it going to happen overnight? No. But I mean, focusing on the achievable, focusing on the things that you can impact, in some aspects, containers may make it a bit easier for agencies and organizations.
That leads well into what my next question I was going to ask. All right, so for all these agencies that are contemplating going into containers, now that we've completely scared them off, maybe there's a way to say, okay, well, how do you address these security issues that we were talking about? Well, I mean, are there anything like zero trust and all of that? Oh, these problems, they're kind of omnipresent, whether you're using containers or not. But does anything about containers has an inherent security problem? And how do we address those? Or how do we address using containers? How do we address any of these problems that we've been?
Yeah, I think you take a holistic approach, and I've supported different government agencies for a bunch of different years, and I think contracting is getting better. Where it's like, all right, Ryan, you're going to be a person that goes and watches the sim, and you Fitz, you're going to go do this thing, and then Rick, you're going to be focused on this, and like never the three shall talk. Well, now I think that's sort of like extending the bridge and allowing folks to sit there and have, discussions, because security is everyone's business. Maybe I'm a developer. It's 2020. It's everyone's business, right? So I think tools that are a platform that help folks go across from, where we start, which is maybe CI/CD, and then take that through to runtime. And then, oh gosh, heaven, should we have a problem? You can have some forensics capability. Those are going to be tools that have value and connect all these disparate capabilities and give you some observability. So, containers and Kubernetes have this really great thing called admission controllers. And with admission controllers, if you have an admission controller watching for things go through the CI/CD pipeline and something ends up on your platform and it's not gone through that, the admission controller eject that right off of that. And so, like, there are ways to eat this apple, and it's a different set of problems, and we can be secure when we go to containers. And is it hard? Yes. But is security worth it? Absolutely, yes. This is taxpayer information. This is all of the things that we don't want, other nation states getting access to. And, I think at the end of the day, it's not a tool thing. It's a engagement and enablement and helping people be with training. And I spend a lot of time outside of work trying to stay up to speed because it changes so quickly. And I know other people may not have that time because they've got families or they've got life and they've got all the things, but it's worthwhile pursuit. And if we can help folks be more secure, then we're providing tremendous value. I hope I answered your question. I don't know if I did.
I don't know. Show me your fingernails. All right. Are there any additional challenges to an agency in monitoring and identifying container-based issues?
Yeah, I would argue there is, because some things it's like we've got to log everything. Well, okay, for NIST 853, there is a component of auditing those types of things. But what happens when you don't have a capability, or things happen within the container and they don't get logged? I mean,
Right.
We use system calls. We're using eBPF for our security capability, and our agent can sit there and slice and dice and give you a focus on, if you're an SRE or a developer, on your monitoring capabilities. Are you meeting your SLAs? I would argue that monitoring is a fantastic way to let you know if you may be about to have a problem. It could be the canary in the coal mine. And then the system calls that we have are a fantastic way. Like, system calls don't lie. Like, we've got a capability where we can show you somebody got terminal access to a container. And in that 30-second forensics capture, we get like 500,000 system calls. So it is a fantastic single source of truth. So I would say, if you're not looking for those ways, or you're not inspecting those, or you don't have instrumentation to help you be safe, your legacy tools, maybe they say they're cloud aware. And maybe that's because they're getting fed metadata from your cloud service provider about what, EC2 instance they're running on and things like that. Or maybe they're getting some Kubernetes. Hopefully, if you're running containers, hopefully you've got integration with your orchestrator, so you can have an idea, hey, this container in this namespace in this cloud service provider did something interesting. So you can go sit there and find what's going on, versus you having to apply labels and then you having to go and find out what's going on. If I have to do anything, just ask my wife. It probably won't get done. But if you can integrate with the orchestrator, who has this incredibly rich metadata, and then you can have a tool like a Sysdig that can sit there and watch all the interaction between the containers and the host, I mean, you're on the right path, I would argue.
I like to pull on that thread a little bit. What I like about Sysdig is it runs in all environments, or at least should be, because a workload or a container in any evolutionary or maturity state is going to be going to be able to be detected with a vulnerability earlier in the process, which is a principle that we adhere to, so that you can rectify the situation a lot faster. With your runtime analysis, a lot of agencies rely on the scanning or the upfront activities as things change, as they get enhanced or corrected and they move forward into production, and including production. But it's better to always have that runtime monitoring, so that you can detect it when a vulnerability arises that might be halfway through your iteration and might be a serious vulnerability. So I think that's important to note as we go in these agile and continuous postures. Always an application lives. Traditionally, it's lived to the point where there's no modifications, and sometimes it stays out there indefinitely. The new model is to keep these things going, and if they don't provide value, get rid of them. But there's a lot of time between those.
The runtime is super critical, because people are, they have their jobs to do, and then out of the blue comes some CVE, and it's scramble, scramble, scramble. We have to go address this, and maybe your organization or agency's O&M policy is 15 days for a medium to high vulnerability. So the clock starts ticking, and you have 15 days to go fix that. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, maybe that's a pretty difficult thing to exploit. With Sysdig, with our runtime capabilities, you can create rules to watch for exploitation. And then as you sit there and work to patch and update that, you can make sure that you're not getting popped for that, which is really incredible. And then that allows you to move things into production in a metered fashion versus, oh gosh, hair on fire, I've got to fix this. because it's helping you set priorities and be aware and watchful for if these things come from. It's something we are aware of and we need to fix. Yeah. But, this just jumped in status because we are actually noticing people knocking on our door, jiggling the door handles, trying to lift up our windows, trying to get into our infrastructure. And so I think that's really important too. And then, I wouldn't call us a threat intelligence company, but by way of the Sysdig policies that you can enact, and a lot of these are out of the box, helping you go from, sort of like crawl, walk, run to being secure. I don't ever want name a thing to happen in maybe production or maybe this namespace. And if that thing were to happen by way of integration with your orchestrator, we could absolutely alert you every time. But then we could sit there, stop, pause, or kill the container, which keeps you safe. And at that point, because it is a container, it'll just be nuked from orbit and then it'll be spun back up. So you don't have to worry about people having this persistent hold in your infrastructure.
Yeah, that actually leads into the idea I've always had with the problem with, or maybe I would envision someone who is adopting, containers as an agency, that yes, there's the CVEs and they're responding to external threats immediately, but I've also have an environment now where I can create things and destroy them immediately or do them in a very short time frame. So how do I worry about internal threats? Someone creating a container that just goes out and does something that it shouldn't be doing and then drops itself. Like, how do you monitor and log those activities when you've got an internal threat?
Yeah, so that goes back to Sysdig has an activity audit capability, which that'll be, we've got event forwarding into, maybe it's a Splunk or maybe it's a QRadar. I don't know if people are still using ArcSight. A bunch of years ago, some of the customers I supported were still choosing to do that. So those capabilities exist, Mike, to help people be aware of that. Maybe the innocent idiot that took down production. Why did this happen? We can go look back and see what happened. Or the malicious insider. And you can address those people in two different ways. It's like, hey, you took down production. You didn't do this quite right. Let's help you be successful going forward. Or, hey, we need to go put eyeballs, or we need to march this person out of the building because he's done things that we do not allow.
Let's just call that person Rick.
The malicious idiot, or the malicious person, or the idiot person? I don't know. Yes.
All the above.
Let's say yes.
Yeah, it's sort of those runtime things help you with maybe 0-day exploits where something's being checked on or exploited that, because there's not a CVE or because there's not a thing that we can keep from getting promoted to your running platform, we can still be on the lookout on. And despite how they go about doing that, if something was to happen and that MySQL instance was, instead of going to 3306, it's now going 8080, or somebody got terminal access in a namespace or project that you would never expect them to have, we can still be protected. It doesn't matter how they got that access or how they're trying to change that. We can still be protected as an organization or enterprise.
Yeah, what I really like about Sysdig, and I think when Fitz and I were introduced some years ago to your technology, what we really liked was the forensic capability to freeze like a DVR what's happening at the literally CPU or the system call level, as you mentioned earlier. That's where you really get into the nuts and bolts of what's actually happening on the node or a workload, so that quick remediation can be discovered, troubleshooting is expedited, so that you can rectify it at the root, as opposed to spending weeks trying to triage and try to recreate the problem.
Absolutely. It goes back to maybe a container, was trying to grow out of its little, petri dish and beacon out to something. You can see exactly where that container went to. You can see what it pulled down, and then you can use that information to go do a hunt throughout the organization with other tools that you're certain your SOC folks are very familiar with. So I get out of bed for the security capabilities that Sysdig provides. I really think that they're doing a fantastic job for that. And I really, 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 having sat 100 years ago supporting the government in a CERT and a NOC position, the workflows that we provide, despite the technology being very, very different, the workflows are going to be familiar to CERT and SOC. The incident responders, the network defenders, So they can still be successful doing their job, regardless of whether your agency is forward leading into containers or if they're not.
Yeah, we'll just call that process the search for Rick. How about that?
Dun, dun, dun.
So that leads kind of into it. And you mentioned the Zero Trust Network earlier in the conversation. How are the container-based platforms affected by this Zero Trust Network posture that we're seeing growing more and more, which should be, out of the box the default, but it's growing in popularity and governance and compliance within the public sector?
Yeah, the thing with containers is, everything's super dynamic, and zero trust should be, we're not going to allow anything by default. Mm-hmm. And that can sometimes make your job fun when you have these ephemeral IPs and things talking to different, containers talking to different containers, and you've got services and things like that. But I mean, Sysdig is using native Kubernetes controls. We're using Kubernetes network policies. And at the end of the day, it's just a piece of YAML that you apply to your cluster, and you've got this access for containers to talk to other containers. We've made that simple. Because we can see the interactions between the containers, like there's a really great feature where we can give you a topology map in Sysdig Monitor, and it's basically Google Maps for your container, namespace. I love that thing. If I was to try to do that in a competitor's product, it'd take me 100 years to do that. And that's out of the box. We are so container focused. So I think at the end of the day, by way of using, open source and Kubernetes native security policies, network policies, we can help you see what's going on. And if you don't like that this container is connecting to that container over this port or whatever, maybe that's a misconfiguration issue. You can go have a chat with your developers, or in the meantime, you can nuke that from orbit, generate the YAML from our GUI, and then go apply that on your cluster. And some will say, "Oh, I'd like the capability to do that from within the web UI." We would say that's like giving your child a machine gun. Probably not the best idea. Maybe your child is very responsible, but maybe I don't have any children. I don't think that's something I would do if I was a parent that did.
They have trouble pulling that thing back. Yeah,
for sure. So
it's fine.
It's just another way to have guardrails and help keep you safe. And I don't hate that. It's going back to DoD. Still may use this defense in depth. Yeah. So having an awareness of how things should run, and then allowing that. And if they don't run that way, then we don't allow that. But you first have to have visibility in how they run. And sometimes as a developer, it's hard to know, because you have to make sure, like, we can have DNS and things that you may forget. So I like that Sysdig gives you this graphical user interface to see the different connections that you have to help make your job a little bit easier. And then you can have discussions with your developers if you're a security practitioner, or they can have discussions with you if they're developers, and you can cross the aisle and you can both be successful together. And at the end of the day, it's, performing whatever, requirement that your agency or organization exists to serve, and then also keeping your IT, information systems and the important things safe.
If I can pull on that thread a little bit with this movement towards the open source software, I think Zero Trust also addresses the ingredients that make up your workload, as well as the people that are executing or involved with your workload itself. So I know Sysdig has a great scanner for looking for vulnerabilities, and I think what the layman doesn't know within the public sector or even IT in general is those ingredients that make up either your application or the image that constitutes your workload could also be compromised as well. So the zero trust is you trust no one. And there's, I think the statistics are something to the effect of like 63% or 65% of Docker images from Docker Hub have serious vulnerabilities. Using scanning or having scanning in your repertoire needs to be included to create that kind of posture, not only network posture, but what's coming into your environment. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, somebody at one of the conferences we attended, we were probably all there together. They said that like Ford pickups are using something like 100,000 lines of code. Right. And Ford's not writing, 100,000 lines of code. They're using open source to get you, some capabilities so you can have the infotainment, so the car or the phone lady can sit there and talk to you and read you text and play you music and things like that. So, I mean, we absolutely should be aware of that as we go to like self-driving cars and this whole idea of IoT. There's a bunch of real world impacts that if these things don't get scanned and they have vulnerabilities and then they get taken over, they could have, real human consequences. I think DoD gets that. Mm-hmm. I think they're so focused on the container image creation and they're not so focused on what happens after it's on the running platform. Maybe I would say let's share that focus towards the running platform, and then let's put risk observance in place so we can see what's actually going on. But it's Rick. It's to your point, like zero trust no one. I think with the software, you got to trust no one, and that's I think we've got. I'm not a developer. I'm a security person, and I don't know how to crack that nut. But I think with absolutely package scanning and container scanning, and then if you want to take it a step further, doing like static or dynamic analysis scanning as part of your CI/CD pipeline, I think that's an incredibly good idea. I think you should do that. I'm not saying, don't do one and then just do the other. I think you should do it all. And then depending on your risk profile too, and the government has a very, very good awareness of it's asymmetrical. They got a lot of people trying to get in their front door versus, others. Mm-hmm. They're putting up the coins and they're putting up the cash to try and do that well.
Yeah, I'll pull on your fingernail just a little bit because I have a tweak to your. It's 100,000 lines of code. It was like 10 million lines of code.
I believe it. And yeah, gosh,
but I am a developer, and you're right though. I mean, you've got to do it all. You can't just rely on one or the other. You've got to scan it all. You've got to scan your code. You got to scan everything you're using. You've got to anything. That zero trust network policy should also be to every bit of source code that you're getting, either from your own people or from open source. You've got to scan it. You can't assume that it's good. I mean, case in point with security. I mean, with the thing that's gone on this weekend. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we've got a bit of ways to go, I think. But Mike, being a developer, we're shifting everything left. So now we're scanning and we're helping you be more secure, and now we're having to sit there and watch for policies too. So I think a Sysdig as a platform to help take from build to run to respond. We can also put in enforcement for the organization and the enterprise. So it's like, hey, as part of Docker best practices, we're not to run port 22 exposed. Mm-hmm. I hope, I'm not a developer, but I know that you should not be running SSHD in a container. Mm-hmm. I hope you are not doing that. But, okay, we'll make sure that port 22 isn't exposed. And if it is, we'll, either warn you to death like mom, or we'll sit there and stop that. I think with a scanning capability, that just helps enforce at the enterprise good hygiene and good practice. So we don't find ourselves having these really like brain, just like scratch your head like, oh, they did what?
Right.
People can sit there and have SMEs take an idea and say, this is what we want. And then they can apply that against the enterprise. So you can secure the enterprise and you don't have to worry about people doing knuckleheaded things.
Mm-hmm. That hits a tender spot because everything shifts left onto my lap. Wait, why did I end up on the left? All right. But the point being though is I can't be expected to know it all, or rather, and I'm a senior developer. I can't expect all my developers underneath in any hypothetical shop to know these things. I mean, what port is what? From a development point of view, I'm trying to optimize code. I don't care what port it's running on. And that's why I need these tools. I need something that tells me, oh, don't do that, do this. Because I'd be happy to do that if someone tells me. Right. I can't know it all.
We shouldn't expect you to enforce the things upon yourself. You've already got a full-time job. Let the software or the tool help you and help you nudge you towards success. And that goes back to maybe our O&M policy is to not allow vulnerabilities after so many days because we've got a patching and update policy. With Sysdig, you can sit there and you can dial that in. So for a couple of days, maybe it's 15 based on the vulnerability. It'll still go through CI/CD pipeline, but on that 16th day, it doesn't pass go. It doesn't collect $200, and a lot of folks appreciate that. And then like I said earlier, we've all got full-time jobs. We all may be working remote with dogs or kids or Muppets and puppets and bears and snow. Now we got snow today. There's a lot of things that just let the developers do the developers' job, have this enterprise policy. And then, if they mess up, cool, remind them what the policy is so they can go fix that versus having wild, wild west. Cause there's no way that you can possibly be successful if that's the case. Cause why is that? People have more time than all the busy employees that are working for you trying to do this and secure this. I mean, just that's the reality.
Well, all right, that kind of dovetails a little into the concerns of trying to achieve for an agency trying to achieve ATO, and let's talk a little bit about how I can do that or how does a container-based platform help me with that, or what else do I have to consider with it, and maybe even with the spirit of the show, how do I do that continuously? How do I continuously address ATO?
We need a bell, Fitz, for every time we use that.
Whoever says continuously the most wins a beer at the end of the episode.
You should have it as like one of those like emergency stop buttons that you can just hammer on. I think that'd be incredibly awesome. Maybe Santa brings that for one of you guys. I don't know. I'd love to work on that. So your question is around continuous ATO with containers. The nice thing with containers is it's all right, we found a problem. Well, let's go redeploy. Let's fix it, and then let's go redeploy. And you can watch the deployments. Did that make it better? Did that make it worse? If it made it worse, as you've got infrastructure as code, you can roll that back and make things less work. So I sort of like that a whole lot. And then you can try it again versus hands on a keyboard in production, trying to monkey around with something that no one knows. And maybe they didn't do it right. So you can't enforce, policy to validate that they did things right. Maybe you've got blogging, but that's generally, in my opinion, to maybe look at, oh, hey, something did go wrong, and now we have to find out just exactly what it was. So I think that's something, the ability for us as Sysdig and like that risk observability thing, I stole from one of our customers. I love it a whole lot. It really just makes me really happy what value we're providing to them, because they can use us to see what's normal and variations in normal versus anomalies. With Sysdig's monitor, you can sit there and say, hey, if things bump out of a normal threshold, send me an alert or do a capture so we can see just what's going on. And then we can inspect that and say, we did a deployment. We sort of expected that, or this is not right. We have to roll up our sleeves and have an idea of what's going on. But it's without that instrumentation. If you're going to containers, and you're going to get a continuous ATO. I mean, like, are you though? Are you? Because things are so dynamic and changing. I would hate to have my name scribbled onto the piece of paper saying that it's continuously authorized to operate. I mean, I wouldn't want to manage that risk. Mm-hmm. How do you guys feel about that? That scares me to death.
Yeah, no. I mean, you have to have a monitoring system that lets you know when errors arise. Because the quicker you know about it, the ability to solve them is known, and B, the quicker it is to remediate, so that you don't get to the 1 yard line, so to speak, when you're trying to deploy into production, and all of a sudden the ATO authority to operate or a third party comes in and says you have these vulnerabilities. Well, that would have been nice to know during the beginning of your sprint or during middle of your sprint, so that you can rectify it in place. So I think it's the movement towards that continuous identification of problems and vulnerabilities that, like Fitz said, the average developer doesn't know they occur until they occur. And the more information you can give about that particular vulnerability, the quicker they'll be able to rectify it.
Yeah, well,
I agree 1,000. Go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead. No.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I think, security is important and the government gets that. Sometimes the tail wags the dog, and you have to have a reasonable understanding on just what you're afraid of and if that's reasonable or unreasonable, and have adult conversations around that versus being every headline that you read. So partner up with folks who get it, and then also know when you don't know, and then go seek out information and partner with folks who can help educate you on that. And there's a center of excellence being created in the government, and I like that within DoD. The other thing, it's so that's a good thing. A bad thing is to stick your head in the sand and just not be aware, and bad things happen, and then they continue to happen for months or years at a time, and then you find yourself in a position where you have to say, "Hey, government employee or government contractor or U.S. taxpayer, we messed up, and we need to do something to watch over your credit because maybe your personal identifying information was breached or worse." Things that come to mind that could be really, really bad is people getting in the supply chain with like the vaccine that they're talking about that's just been rolled out and things like that. Like, it goes back to these are real things that matter. And, we have to be aware of what's going on in the changes because they are very dynamic. And that's sort of speed and the name of the game, and helping people, do their job better, faster, stronger. And I think done right, it helps achieve all those things where people can be successful. They can get better value. They can, realize the benefits of containers and this, velocity that can be created from that. But I may be wrong.
Well, I think ATO, it varies from agency to agency, but the as long as you're putting forth a continuous process where you're collecting all the right information, and you could start the sprint and that CVE didn't exist, or didn't. Well, it existed, but no one knew about it. And then by the end of you go to ATO and they say, well, you're not addressing the CVE that came out yesterday. Well, yeah, but I have identified it, and I'm now working on it. If I can collect the evidence, throughout the entire tool chain, then I'm happier to at least attempt a CTO. That doesn't mean a continuous ATO. That it's not saying I am 100% secure all the time, but I am doing all the right things at least to get me there. And I'm collecting the right evidence.
I think it's an adult way to approach it, because the second that you run a scan and you put it on the shelf and say, "Yep, we were secure, we were compliant," that's a snapshot in time. Right. To your point, Mike, things change continuously. They are very dynamic. So having the scanning capabilities, as part of CI/CD to help prevent bad things from getting on the platform, having that capability at runtime, so you can sit there and say, "Hey, this project or namespace wasn't bad yesterday, but now this package is running." And then your ability to hunt through your containers for OS images or packages, and then provide reports to your CISO or other concerned information assurance partners is really important. And we have ability to hunt for those CVEs and changes within, CVEs and things like that. And then also produce reports, which that gets a lot of folks on the IA side very, very interested in. So they can have proof to sit there and validate that, yeah, sir or ma'am, we are actually safe.
Right.
For the things that you're concerned about, focused on this. We may be not safe in other ways, but that's taking that holistic approach as well too.
Terrific. Well, congratulations, Ryan. You made it through the serious portions of the questions. Pull your hands. Let me see your fingernails. The loved ones in the studio audience, they're very relieved. So we'll end it with our kind of kitschy type of question for our podcast, which is, if you can do something continuously, what would it be?
Yeah, this is the hardest question of them all. I've queried friends, I've queried family.
It's really not meant to be that hard. We're not going to hold you to it.
I see the fingernails, they're intact.
Yeah, if I could continuously do one thing, I love to cook and I love to entertain and I love to be around fun people. And, this year sort of put a damper on that. So I would love to continuously be around, people. And I appreciate that a lot more, being around folks like you and getting to work with you guys and DLT as partners. And, even though it's virtual, I still love it because there's only so much things you can do in your house, seeing your dog, seeing your family. And that's just like, wow, I need a break. So I would love to be around people and hanging out and having fun and stuff like that. So continuous to that. And then second, would probably be
there's two continuous things.
Follow-up.
Two?
Yeah. You mentioned pizza earlier, Rick, and I think I would probably eat pizza continuously if I could.
So a continuous party, a continuous high school party is what it sounds like. Pizza.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. We really appreciate it. And great answer all around. And I'd like to thank you again, and thanks Fitz for co-hosting. And thank the audience for spending some time with us as we learn more about the continuous X equation solving. And I think we took a big chunk out of continuous security and continuous monitoring today with Ryan and Sysdig. So again, thank you very much for your time and your patience, and look forward to future podcasts.
Thank you all.